for remote selling, because that's the theme that everyone is top of mind. So I think that we're live now. So let's just kick it off officially. Candice, we've known each other for years. I'm delighted to reconnect. And I think this is one of the special things that is happening now that we're all working from home. It's allowed us to reflect back on our previous lives, what has worked, what hasn't worked. And you've become such an amazing resource for all sales enablement leaders. And I was really inspired by our previous work together of thinking about the process that goes into an effective enablement strategy. So I'd love to kick it over to you. You're working at ThoughtSpot, you're leading the sales enablement team. As a quick warm-up, how did you get into sales enablement in the first place?
Dan, you're really sweet. That was such a great opening. I appreciate it. Honestly, so like most people, I did not come on a direct path to sales enablement. This was not something I knew of as an opportunity or as a career outside of college, right? That nobody ever tells you about these things. I actually started in marketing, and I was hired by a CEO to kind of come in at a Series B startup and just do all things marketing. Found that I really liked product marketing, and so that's where I developed my skill set. And through networking, met a woman who was running sales enablement, and she said, "Listen, I just need somebody to come in and get things done. And I hear you're that. You want to try this? I think you'll be good at it." I was like, "Sure, I'll give it a go." 10 years later, here I am. So that was my foray.
Yeah, I love that. I feel like that echoes some of the similar things for me getting into sales as well. It's like started on this medical path. I was going to be a doctor in the ER, and then somehow ended up in sales and doing trading. I think those are the best types of careers. It's like blending two different worlds together and to create a really cool hybrid profession. So we got three major topics that we're going to go into, and just to set the stage for what everyone will get out of our discussion today, the first topic, and I'm going to check my notes, is the reevaluation of sales enablement platforms today. It's the assumptions that we made going into 2020 versus are those assumptions still valid? What are the trade-offs to look out for? And Candice, I'm really excited for you to give us some really good tactical takeaways. The second thing, but the second thing is going to be around once you've implemented the sales enablement, how do you make sure that it's actually useful for the team and not just as a path for certification, and then getting tactical into the metrics to make sure that it's actually being used how you would want it to. And then the third thing, which is near and dear to me, is how do you make training actually more beneficial? What is the difference on how people in the workplace are actually consuming knowledge? Did I capture the three major takeaways topics together?
Yeah, I think so. There's also another one that I want to dig into, which is the role of data in how we prioritize our enablement efforts. And so I'll talk to that a little bit more too.
Okay, well, let's get into that. So the first topic is then this reevaluation of sales enablement. So what are some of the ways that you've thought about this differently, reflecting especially in the last month, now that everything has really changed?
Man, it is an interesting thing where we sometimes get into the habit of thinking that what we do is a fixed point. And believe it or not, I have a background in anthropology, and I will say that this is a topical area for anthropologists. And if there's any of you out there, please, raise your hands, let me know. No, it's honestly, anthropology teaches us that we should always question our assumptions, and that culture is never fixed. What it was at a snapshot in time does not necessarily mean that that is what it is today. And I think that's what we're seeing actually with sales and sales enablement, especially now in this new normal where everything is virtual. Travel is going to be restricted for God knows how long. We're going to have to adapt what it means to teach and how we allow people to learn. And so when we looked at our sales enablement platform, when I started at ThoughtSpot 2 years ago, it was a much older school platform and candidly was not designed for modern sales. It was very much a classroom-based consumption model with long form courseware that you could take, spend 3 hours on one topic area. And frankly, nobody does that anymore. So I knew I needed to change the platform and change the courseware and all those things. So we chose a different platform in June of last year and set out to build it in a new way. This is also my third time in installing or re-platforming sales enablement. And so having learned from the previous 2 times that no matter how good our intentions are, in delivering lots of really meaningful training content in various form factors that people are not actively thinking, you know what I need to do today? Go train. They're not thinking that. And so I started to reassess, and what we ended up developing was intentional training content and then separately reference materials. So reference materials are just as important for how we help sellers be successful. And reference materials can be embedded in other places. So quick
Yeah,
look.
I'm really excited to dig into that because I know from my bias as like a trainer, like I want to go in and I thought my expertise is like basically lecturing. It's like, here's all my expertise, is what you need to know, the frameworks, now go do it. But that's such a small piece of it. And it has to do with like the forgetting curve that after training's over, 90% is lost after 30 days. So if you don't have super easy to digest reference materials that helps reinforce it or even on demand, it's a wasted investment. It like feels good. It's like checkbox, you got the training, but it actually doesn't move the needle. And then everybody's frustrated.
Yeah, 100%. I always say onboarding is a process, but truly education is a process too. It's not a single event. It's a series of things. It's events. It's also, ad hoc learnings and reinvestment and curiosity and encouraging that curiosity, encouraging people to share what they're learning, all that. So that's in fact how we built the platform for sales enablement today, is built on that bifurcation, if you will, but really it's cross-pollination between dedicated learning time and then reference materials. So yeah,
So that went into your like reevaluation last year of different sales enablement platforms. Like the first generation that we all got into was like kind of this old school LMS that I know that I saw in college that was so painful to use. It's like you had to log in, it had the awkward forum that like ask a question here and you like type your answer, like multiple choice, and you get it wrong for no reason. It just didn't feel good. Like the intentions were there, but the applications, like I never wanted to use that. And so what you've found is a platform that helps hopefully bridge that gap. You still need like fundamental certification training, but you also need that on demand, either for prep or like during the moment, like what is the thing that I need from the training from earlier. So I think that we'll get into that. But is there I guess like any tips that you have for people that are reevaluating or currently looking for a way to augment their completely remote sales force on evaluating different platforms?
absolutely. So one of the critical things that we learned in this is that sales enablement people are really good at understanding how salespeople need to think, how they need to learn, what it is that they need to know. But maybe we're too removed at what they're doing on a day to day and what they need from sales enablement in order to keep going on with their day. It's not, I'm going to say this, it's going to sound harsh, but I don't mean it this way. It's a little narcissistic. Like we're the ones that matter, and in reality, we're not enough thinking about how to help our reps just get on with it, right? They don't need to spend this amount of time. So the way we structured things was, what are they doing during pipe generation, and what are they doing to accelerate their business? Those are the two sort of key form factors in the way that we've architected our content, that after 6 months, we realized we needed to do. Like we did this for 6 months. We were like, look, we have all the things, just go get curious. Look at all the possibilities of different things you could use and learn and do. And we weren't really getting good enough. So we restructured them for pipe generation and then accelerating customer engagements. And the content then is structured around the activities that they're taking during the course of those events, if you will, or sequence of events. So that is actually we're seeing now a much better weekly user adoption than we did before we had that structure. So it's been a huge improvement for us.
Great. So the form factor there, what I interpreted it as is a kind of a challenge question that they would take the material and actually have to complete something. And in that, something they completed was actually for them to use. Is that how you intended it?
No, actually, so let me maybe reframe even further. So there's intentional learning material, if you will. Like I'm here to train. And so there's certification or courseware that you can take. But separately, there's reference material. And we're just embedding that reference material opportunistically in the, like, I'm looking for messaging for this particular persona, or I need to talk to somebody in a vertical that's already experience this use case for our solution. So we give them that solution-based content, but we also insert little opportunities for learning. So that's what I mean.
Oh, I see.
It's like we're using reference material to help them achieve the actions that they're already taking, rather than I'm going to go learn. So sales enablement platform has actually, and maybe this is more to the point, content management solutions and learning management solutions have been eating at each other's edges for the last 10 years. And we just said, let's do both. We're going to embrace it. So we'll own the content management as well, because that's ultimately serving the sales productivity.
Yeah, I really like it how you framed it. I got reminded of something that you had mentioned. It's like the narcissistic comment that you mentioned. It's we create something and we want to justify that what we've done, like with data, like look how good this is. But by focus on that type of measurement, it gets away from the real purpose, which is making our sales teams actually successful in changing behavior. And I had this discussion with my wife the other day where it's kind of like cleaning. You don't notice when the house is clean, you notice when it's dirty. But it's a huge amount of like little bits of effort to keep the house clean, or even laundry. Like you notice when the laundry piles up and you like kind of notice like, oh, I got fresh clothes that are ready to go. And it kind of feels like that's the role of a really strong sales enablement. Like you become so good by almost being invisible. Like things are there when you need it, but you don't notice that it's not there when you need it. And I do feel like that's the kind of like a weird ebb and flow of like justifying the power that the sales enablement team has on making a sales team successful. Has that been your experience as well?
Absolutely. I think the the one thing that we all know is that we want to let the heroes shine. We want to let them shine, but we know that that hero is only possible of shining when there's a huge amount of people behind that person, him or her, to be able to shine. And so that's been the way that I've started to reframe what enablement does. Hey, listen, I love to shine. Put me on a stage and I'm having a great time. I love teaching. I love being in front of that group and helping them have that aha moment. This is not about me thinking like, we just need to step behind the scenes. It's actually fundamentally thinking about us as the coaches, as us as the people that are supporting the people that need to go be on stage. So it's our opportunity to step back. And in doing that, it allows us to actually be more powerful. So it's a strange sort of give and take. It's like the let go to have power kind of thing. I don't.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I'm sure a dynamic that most sales enablement professionals are dealing with. So I love how you verbalize it and just kind of brought that to the surface. But in the interest of time, let's go into the second topic of it, because it feels like a good transition to talk about some of the data behind it. And you had mentioned this. I really like that, like nibbling at the edges. Like that's a really powerful visual of LMS, learning management systems versus CMS or content management systems are working together, and how that relates to the engagement that you're seeing from the team. Because LMS, it's typically for like onboarding or a new sales training initiative, but the content is for that ongoing or on demand or reference material. So what are some of the ways that you've seen that develop from the data perspective?
absolutely. So I'll say with the previous two installations of a new learning management solution, which was built to be a learning management solution, adoption was near 100% for the first 4 to 6 weeks of any new rep, and then it plummets to like zero. Essentially, they never log in again. And the amount of time and energy and investment we put in to maintain these LMSs is crazy. We all know this. It's like a time sink. There's just nothing, you can't get away from it. So to go from really high to zero, it just doesn't feel good, number one. But number two, it's also hard to justify that spend. Like it's a necessary requirement, but it becomes subsumed, like L&D wants to take it over, or it becomes some part of the bigger company-wide learning management solution, and therefore it's not designed then for sales, and so it doesn't have the sales like experience we want, and maybe you lose control of it altogether. And so I got frustrated with that. I really did. And so I wanted to choose a different path this time, this third time around. So I did, and I chose a solution that had actually seen the two worlds colliding and said, we're going to do this. And so it's early days for them, but we've invested. It is ShowPad if you're curious. previous solutions I have looked at, evaluated, implemented. I can talk about it if you want, but really what I care about is what have we done now and what are we
Yeah.
seeing now? And the most fantastic news is when we first rolled it out, like any new LMS, sales rolls their eyes, like, who cares? It's an LMS. I don't care. But we did a series of promotional, like, hey, did you know you can do these things? And we rolled out, I don't know, 6 or 7 of those. And what we saw is that increasingly over time, uptick, 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 uptick. And then when we refreshed the architecture to now be pipe gen and accelerate your business, we're now seeing it's on average about 67% weekly users are actively logging into this thing, which from my perspective is like such a huge win. I've never seen numbers like that. And even in asking the vendors, what is your average weekly user count? They don't want to talk about it because I'm assuming it is really low. So by using
I do want to jump in there because it's really low for me. Like, I totally feel this issue that you're coming up with is like so much effort has been gone into our online course, and we deliver our training with a blended classroom, live instructor delivered through Zoom, and a supplemental online course. But people don't log in once the course is over. And it breaks my heart because so much effort has gone in there. So yeah, those numbers are incredible. I remember, like, when we were preparing for our discussion today, you mentioned that your goal was 75%, and 67% seems really close. So you're 2 out of 3 now versus 3 out of 4. Uh, but it's also higher than you've ever seen. So what are you gearing towards that success? Is it some of the way that you message the new rollout to the team?
partially. So it's partially the way I think that's how we got a groundswell. Like, let's be honest, because unless they were new people, they were unlikely to log in, period. I didn't want to wait for it to be like, after 6 months, we finally are seeing, 25% weekly. So I wanted to get aggressive about it. So we did do an aggressive rollout. But I really honestly think we've done the analysis. One of the nice things about the Showpad content management side is that it's a pretty robust CMS that they've developed over time, and you get navigation analytics out of it. So I even know how they're clicking through to get the pipe gen and accelerate business. I know which pages they're going to. I know what content they're downloading. I know how often. I know how much time they're spending. And so what we're finding is the most critical thing for us, for our solution, because we sell analytics, you can use analytics for literally any reason. So we have thousands of use cases potentially, and we have only about 300 customers. So our reps are in there almost daily looking for different use case reference material. And that is the most important thing that they're looking for. So if I were to give you one takeaway, that would be that, like, put all of your use case material in there. If you're like us, maybe for another organization, other solution, maybe it's solution or vertical focus. They're looking both for outbound materials as well as just learning, like, what is somebody else doing? What did this other rep say worked for them? How do I know if this is a good use case for my organization, my prospect that I'm talking to? That sort of thing.
Yeah, I love it. I think you and I remember, like, that's one of the reasons actually we got reconnected, is that we launched a new course on Showpad. And I think the effort that that team is putting into making some pretty great innovations around how salespeople get content, both for onboarding and ongoing training, it feels like you are using it to the right way. It's like announcing it, making people aware of certain things, changing behavior. And yeah, I do recognize this feeling that you have, that the new people are much hungrier to get new information versus existing team members that have gotten comfortable doing it how they have been doing it. And so I think having that groundswell across both types of learners is really powerful. So thank you for sharing that. Let's go into something tactical. What are some of the metrics that you recommend tracking to see engagement? I think that 67% number came from weekly active users, or people actually logging in. But what are some of the other metrics that you're tracking?
So the other things we're looking at are, what are the top 10 assets people are looking at? So we're sharing that actually with marketing to improve collaboration there. We're looking at the different regions to know which regional director, regional VP of sales, is their organization more focused on one area or not? So that gives us a little bit of information there. But what's also interesting that we're doing, and if you don't mind, I want to sidestep over into how we're looking at data overall. Like that, this is like one of those areas that sales enablement hasn't always been tied into, but an area that has been near and dear to my heart. I am very metrics driven. So I started this at my previous company where I was using this crazy macro enabled Excel spreadsheet, and 4 different reports I would load from Salesforce into this macro-enabled spreadsheet. And then it would take me, God, I don't even want to tell you because it's embarrassing, but about 40 hours per month to run the numbers. Like, this is nuts that I was spending that much time. But genuinely, because I needed to know where were we failing our new reps and where did my limited resources need to spend time. So it was like weekends that I was doing this, right? Just because I needed to figure it out. We've sort of transitioned that in ThoughtSpot. I have the benefit of working for a company who's really great at analytics. So I get to use our own platform. So I have 8 key metrics that we've now started to track. And those are the things that we're looking at along with the sales leadership on a weekly basis about our account execs to figure out the areas that they need more support. And so having that data really does help me inform my own enablement initiatives. So I can talk to those if you want, if you're curious about.
Yeah, I'd love to. Yeah, let's get into it, because I feel like these are the types of things that will be really valuable for everyone watching the video. Is like, what are the things that I should be measuring, and taking some of those shortcuts. Like, nobody watching this wants to spend 40 hours a month tracking data just to learn some things. So I think that would be a great thing to go through some of those metrics.
Yeah, I know I was supremely nuts for doing what I did, but I could tell you how hungry for information I was. I didn't just want to throw my finger in the air and say, we're going here.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's what we're looking at. We know that actual bookings is a lagging indicator. It is never going to be the thing that you should measure your enablement success on, simply because there's so many different variables that it takes in between the start of an opportunity and the close of an opportunity, that just closing more business is too ambiguous to start, right? So you want to use that as your anchor point for what is overall productivity, but not as the anchor point for what you need to fix. So take a step way back to the beginning and look at activity metrics first. So how many meetings are they booking every week? How many emails are they sending? Phone calls are they making? And we also know notoriously nobody wants to enter that information into Salesforce. It's the worst thing you would ever ask a rep to do. I need to log those phone calls is never going to be a good conversation. So there is tech out there and we use it. So I encourage you to go lobby for it. It is important for their sales leaders to know too.
What tech?
We use people.ai. And so what that does is it scrubs your Google Calendar that we use. If you use Microsoft, I'm sure it's got plugins for that too. But in essence, what it's doing is anything that's on your calendar with an invitation to somebody outside your organization gets logged as a meeting.
Cool. I've seen something similar come out with Gong as well. They have like a really cool dashboard, both for recording the meetings, but just tracking like meetings actually done with outside people. Yeah, love it. Okay, cool.
Gong too. We also use outreach for our SDRs. So they're making calls through outreach, which then auto-populates as calls and emails sent. So the emails also through Google will get logged. So all this stuff, the tech is this, guys. So let's start, take advantage of it. So meetings in the last 7 days. We also want to look at then not just any meeting. You can have any meeting with someone outside of your organization, but meetings that were designed for potential opportunity exploration. And so we have sales stages defined, but one of the key things we figured out was that we were previously looking into only the meetings that had already occurred that were said, this is a good meeting and I'm going to move forward with it. That was the benchmark we were looking at for every rep. And what we found out is that actually what we really want to know is how many meetings that they have turn into those meetings that they like raise their hand and say was a good one. And so that is one of the things that we did reframe, meaning set versus it actually has potential for being an opportunity. So that we want to see that at like 55 or 60%, right? And it turns out we're not there.
Yeah. So if the conversion is too high, that means you're not taking enough initial meetings. But if it's too low, it's like you're wasting a lot of time on people that probably should have been pre-qualified out somehow before.
Exactly. Yeah. So we like I said, we'd like that to be about 55%, and it's not consistent across the board. Some reps are like 90%, others are at 10%. And so on average, we're about 47%. So we have a little bit of work to do there, but I think that is a rep on rep basis. And so this is the other thing you can learn from the data. Is this a global problem, or is it an individual rep problem? Is it a regional director problem? Is it a geography problem, right? You might have different trainings for different things.
So I want to go into that because you also brought up the idea of looking at the top 10 assets that people are using. So you're collecting this data, and I know you're going to go into some of the other metrics, but I'd like to go deeper. How do you present those learnings to take action or get a change of resources to use what you've learned from the data to improve?
You got it. So it actually brings to mind one of the things that we did. This is just little things that we've been trying, right? You try something, throw it out, see if it works, it comes back or it doesn't. One of the things we tried was developing a PG in a box, if you will. And so with a campaign in mind, which vertical, which persona to go target this with, what's the email templates you can use, messaging snippets that go with it. If you want to insert your own, feel free, customer reference snippets that you can insert, as well as a customer facing asset with calls to action. So we packaged this all up but also a demo to go with it, package this all up and put it out there. And what we found was that it's actually become the highest rated thing in the solution. We did another one and it then became the highest rated thing. So people are excited about the kit. They're excited also about the campaign. And so we're finding this orientation on aligning a little bit more to marketing to help speed up their PG efforts is something that they were thirsting for. We didn't even realize. So that has been an improvement in a way. The third thing that we did was also take a look at that data, the top 10 assets, and identify the ones that are sticky. So this asset has been in the top 10 for the last 6 weeks running. Marketing, please go produce more of these. Or sales leaders, tell me more of what you want so we can funnel that to marketing. I often describe enablement as the bridge between everything, but primarily between sales and marketing. So this was one of those great opportunities to do that.
I think data is like such a good equalizer for that. It's like everyone has strong opinions, but they should be held loosely if the data is showing one versus the other. It's like, here, marketing, this is what actually people are requesting. Or sales leaders, like, you're requesting this information, we have something similar and it's performing here. And it's such a cool way to be able to look at the data and say, like, here's actually what the leading indicators are, not just the vanity metrics or the lagging indicators like results to make those decisions. So I feel like there's a lot of insight that you're going to share with the other metrics, but in the interest of time, I'll put that into the YouTube description for everybody to get the hint after this chat is over. But let's go into the third topic that we had, which is one of the other ways of people just to get more out, or sales team, not just people, but sales, customer success, any customer facing team to get more out of how they learn in today's workplace. So what have you noticed on how people have shifted their learning habits now that we're all working remotely?
Yeah, it's interesting, Dan, this has been happening, I think, over the last 10 years, but maybe we didn't realize it had happened so fast and so far. But here's what I figured out. We, as human beings, just in general society, the way we learn isn't, I'd like to go find a course or a lecture series and attend that to learn about this thing. We don't do that. We have a curiosity question, we go to Google, we find our answer, and we move on with our day. If it's a topic that we really are very curious in, maybe we'll spend an hour or two, we'll dig into it, we'll look around, but it's multiple different form factors. We're looking at not just what the experts say, but we're looking at what our peers might have said. We're looking on all the various social media sites, not going to Udemy. Like, for instance, in very few topics do we really go to dedicated hardcore learning on. And so with that said, it's actually, I think, still how people want to learn in business too, that they're not necessarily wanting to learn from a curated form factor created only by a few experts. In fact, I think they want to learn from each other more than they want to learn from somebody centrally located. And so we're trying some things. We don't know if it's going to work or not, but this is my takeaway. It's not a new idea, but peer-to-peer learning used to be the idea of, like, that's how people feel the most connected to what they're learning. They learn from somebody who's already been in their role. But instead of that being in addition to, we're figuring out ways to make that central to, that our learning is going to change, it's going to shift. And enablement right now is the home of the experts, the home of the place that organizes and coordinates and making sure that we get the right experts in front of people for dedicated learning time. Increasingly, we're seeing people want to learn on an ad hoc basis and they want to learn from each other. So enablement then has the opportunity to be that community builder, the Reddit editor, if you will, the person who's making sure that the content is applicable, that it's effective, and the really good content gets promoted and bubbled up rather than being the only organization that's delivering training. So we don't know what this new world's going to look like, but I guarantee it's going to be much more driven by social engagement and much less driven by expert engagement.
Yeah, I totally agree. This is something that I've tried to nerd out a little bit, is the science of learning. And I think what you're bringing up here, the model that resonates the most with me, and I think is a good description of what you're describing as well, is like this normal way of learning, how we always thought learning was only 10% of how people actually learn. This 20%, even though we've titled it here as a role play, but this is seriously like any type of peer-to-peer learning. Like we want to know what other people are doing in this scenario, but most of learning comes from just actually doing it. And so this is like going back to our first topic today. I think it really resonated with me of thinking like, how do people actually apply from the training, like this initial LMS, to the CMS of like the examples, like I need this to prep or on demand? Because then it comes back to like the next part is like, if we only learn it once, we forget it very quickly. And then you have to relearn it, and then you forget it more slowly, relearn it, forget it more slowly, until eventually you mastered it. Like you can't forget some of the things. And then it comes back to this learning dip. It's like we've all gone through this as experts. Part of this relates back to like that Dunning-Kruger effect, where all of us overestimate our abilities because we are blind to what we don't know. But as we get more experience, we actually get less confident of our mastery because we know more of what we don't know. And we know what the possibilities are, or even like what good actually looks like. And so when we're amateurs, we actually rate our confidence higher than true experts. And a couple of examples come through as if you ask a group of people who above average driver is, and if the number is like really large, you would expect 50-50, but the data comes back like mid 80%. Like most people will say they're above average drivers. Same thing happens even in any profession, but medical field, surgeons, it's a lot of this idea of brand new surgeons, they've gone through school, top of their class, and they've been so successful at everything through that they just overestimate their abilities early on in their career. And so I think this is something that as sales professionals, we also need to be aware of. And this idea of LMS for CMS and on-demand learning, this is a really powerful way of thinking about it. When we were discussing before this chat, you had brought up this idea of how people actually learn today. And I think that the COVID-19 situation is like closed this gap. It's like we're crossing the chasm right now of how we should structure learning. But we've all in our personal lives probably learned like this in the past. Like if I want to learn how to fix the side mirror of my car because I accidentally backed into it and I want to try fixing it myself, or how to smoke a fish on a grill and I've never done that before. Most people just go to YouTube and they find something, and it goes back to that peer learning. But what have you found in the professional sense, not just in, I guess, does that still apply in the professional learning environment?
No, I think it does. I mean, let's be honest. There are certain skills that you can learn that apply to every role you're going to ever have in sales. That's why sales methodology training has been around, right? We need that. Here is a repeatable path to success. We all need that, and you need masters to kind of help you teach that. But instead of spending 6 hours a day for 3 days in a classroom, what if you could do that in get a masterclass intro for 20 minutes and then you spend 20 minutes a day learn. I don't know how it's going to look, but I also know in the professional world, especially for companies, you're never going to make that publicly available information, but you can still develop it in such a way that the rep who's that unicorn who's been so successful, they're still never going to be able to articulate well. I can't even say articulate. They can't articulate well what it is that makes them successful but they can have a candid conversation. So it's up to us then to pull it out of them. Like, what is it that you're doing? The guy who's been smoking fish his whole life can show you how to do it without talking. You want to find that person who's able to, have some personality while they're talking. I think it's the same thing, right? Not every video is going to be the same. Not every learning is going to be as valuable, but the more variety and the more we're leveraging the reps who are doing well is going to have a lot more credence with the reps that are trying to learn from someone else. We have to kind of get to the point in our worlds where we realize that we can have more power by letting go. We can become the agency that is empowering others by actually putting them on stage rather than being on stage ourselves. And it is actually a little bit challenging. I think I had an initial like, ooh, Candice, what are you thinking? You're promoting this? Like, you're trying to put yourself out of a job is kind of the first emotional reaction I had when I came up with this idea. But I took a step back and I said, no, this is still an organization that is going to be necessary, will continue to be important, but has a different role to play. More, like I said, of a community builder, of that person who's bringing people to the table to have the discussion, who wants to highlight other people and push them out on stage even when they're not ready. That develops champions for you in your future in a way that you will not see if you just become the person delivering the content. You're on mute, Dan.
So I agree. It's a hard thing to like take yourself out of the equation, but it's what I've found as well is like my initial training videos were 10 minutes long because I had a lot I wanted to say and a lot of like things to apply, but it didn't resonate. People learn now in like 2-minute chunks. Like get to the point. And then also like when I watch YouTube videos now, if I'm trying to search something, it's like I skip the intros. Like I don't need to know all the like show me the thing. And so all of my videos now are more, I guess, evolving into this. Here's the topic, bam, here's how you apply it. And so I'm trying to be strategic by actually being tactical. Like here's how you apply this thing, and then you can map it into whatever experience that you know works for you. But here's the why behind it, and here's the what that you can do immediately after watching the video. And then hopefully it's so valuable, people start recommending it. And I feel like that is the type of way that people are learning. It's like they ask their peers, like, oh, I'm about to do this. Have you seen anything that works? Like, watch this video or check out Candice's new reference document on blank. And that I feel is the modern way that we need to start adapting because that's how we all are preferring to learn today.
Yeah. Listen, we did a virtual boot camp. It was as successful as it could be. The team did a great job, but I also know it was not nearly as effective as it was for in-person, but we don't know the next time we're going to be able to do an in-person one. So let's figure out a way to actually be in the moment with these guys and not think about it from our lens, but from theirs. So stop. Yeah, it's like remove that narcissism away if you can. Pull that mask off.
It's hard, but I think it's really valuable takeaway. So Candice, let's end there. Thank you so much for your time today and sharing your expertise with us. There's a lot that's still changing and evolving, and I just have loved learning from you how you think through it, what you've noticed has worked and not worked. Everybody who's watching, please connect with Candice on LinkedIn. I'll put the link, her LinkedIn profile URL below. Candice, any closing thoughts before we leave today?
This was really, I really enjoyed the conversation, Dan. What I neglected to say, just a little for people to know, I was spending 40 hours a month in the old way in ThoughtSpot. Luckily, it's instantaneous. It's already been set up for me, and all I need to do is filter for the right rep. So I'm spending maybe 10 minutes a week on it. If this is something you want to look into, if this is something that resonates with you, or you're trying to do this, I'm happy to chat with you about what ThoughtSpot can do for you in your org too.
That's awesome. All right. Well, Candice, thank you so much. I look forward to reconnecting. Have a great rest of the day.
Thanks, you too.
Bye.